Mr. Gemmel, I invite you to deliver your opening remarks, and you have 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Senator Veroni. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. It's a pleasure to be
Good
here.
afternoon.
FCM, as I think you know, is the national voice of municipal governments in Canada. We represent 2,000 municipalities of all sizes in every province and territory. And I want to thank you for inviting us to this study, to present as part of your study. There is no bigger priority for municipalities than housing affordability. Municipalities are on the front lines of the housing crisis, and we recognize that our role alongside the federal government and provinces and territories is vital to addressing it. And that's why municipalities have been taking concrete action to address this issue, whether it's through modernizing zoning, increasing density, improving permitting times, using municipal land to build non-market housing. But we know that much more needs to be done. We welcome recent announcements by the federal government, and we're especially encouraged by the focus of the new Build Canada Homes agency on nonprofit and non-market housing. Increasing the supply of non-market housing is critical to improving Canada's housing system and improving housing affordability. Accorder la priorité aux méthodes de construction.
Giving priority to modern construction methods and also help speed up the delivery of housing expected throughout the country.
Focus of Build Canada Homes. However, we're confident that Build Canada Homes on its own will not achieve the federal government's goal of building 500,000 housing units per year, which is roughly double the rate of housing construction currently. In order to meet this goal, there needs to be a significant investment in housing-enabling municipal infrastructure, including the roads, water, wastewater facilities, public transit, parks, all the infrastructure that it takes to build a community. Yesterday's federal budget acknowledged the critical role that municipal infrastructure plays to build housing and grow the economy. However, the infrastructure funding announced was mostly a repackaging of existing funding, and those commitments are not commensurate with the scale of the need and will not meaningfully increase the pace of housing construction. I want to just step back for a moment, though, and just look at the role of municipalities in building housing and the tax structure that municipalities currently have. The reality is that municipalities in Canada have very few tools to generate revenue to fund, maintain, and improve public infrastructure. Property taxes generally make up around half of all municipal revenue and 90% of revenue from taxation. Canada, in fact, has one of the highest reliances on property taxes of any country in the OECD. And as Canada's population and economy grow, municipal revenues from property taxes do not grow in the same way that sales or income tax revenue do. Another fiscal tool that are used by some municipalities across the country, of course, is development charges, which I know you've been hearing about in your study. These are essentially fees that housing developers pay up front to cover some of the cost of the infrastructure required to build new homes and neighborhoods. These fees have different names across the country, and I want to emphasize that how these fees are applied and the rate of these fees varies greatly from one province to another. There are some provinces that don't have these fees at all. From a tax policy perspective, development charges, or however they're referred to, are a good source of revenue for three reasons. They're directly connected to the cost of growth-related infrastructure, which is determined under provincial legislation. Second, they provide municipalities with a predictable and stable source of revenue that's linked to actual cost and construction cost increases. So they grow related to construction price inflation, which other sources of municipal revenues do not. And third, they enable municipalities to price externalities or higher public costs related to lower density development, also known as sprawl. At the same time, I want to be clear, FCM does acknowledge that development charges contribute to the overall cost of housing construction. And we recognize that in some jurisdictions, notably in the GTA and Metro Vancouver, DCs have been increasing significantly in recent years. It must be noted at the same time that development charges are just one of the many factors that contribute to high construction costs, which include land, labor, materials, and borrowing costs, which have all been rising steadily in recent years. Sur la totalité des impôts et taxes, la proportion...
Out of all taxes, the proportion going to municipalities is lower than what goes to the federal and provincial governments.
$1 billion over 10 years to incent municipalities to reduce development charges. This commitment is an important recognition of the importance of DCs as a source of municipal revenue and the need for federal investments in housing enabling infrastructure. It's critical that the federal government doesn't apply a one-size-fits-all approach, and that there is flexibility for each province and territory to recognize provincial differences when it comes to development charges. Okay, sure. What municipalities and developers both want is predictability. Municipalities are open to reducing development charges where they're already high if they're replaced by other sources of revenue. And so I'm happy to speak more in the question and answer period about some of the recommendations that FCM has to ensure that there's long-term predictable sources of revenue to invest in the housing enabling infrastructure that the country needs.